Я училась в школе в Зимбабве. Я была 8 лет. Я сама из Канады. А Эмили говорит, что в основном они базарили про какие-то там технологии, всякие умные слова говорили. Ну, обычная шняга, инопланетная. Основная мысль у него была, что есть хороший путь использовать технологии и есть плохой. А вас посещали впоследствии такие же точные существа? Я не знаю, точно или нет, но были похожи. Какой-то энергетический колпак был над нами, и я знала просто, я не знаю, как это работает, но я знала, что в это время не было времени, время остановилось. Можете ли вы описать нам, какие другие к вам приходили? Другие? После школы этой? Ну это те же самые, наверное. Я только скажу, что они пользуются мульти-имиджевым каким-то механизмом, и они предстают нам... Могу я сказать? Могу? Можно? Да. Ну, у него было инопланетное лицо, и оно менялось, он становился львом. Но, видимо, чтобы веселее было, мне не страшно. И он менялся между инопланетянином и львом. И львом. И львом. Они выглядят так же, как и вот там, да. Но ответ, как правило, не обязательно по поводу того, где они оставили следы, как они одеты были, какие волосы длинные у них были, чем они пахли. Какая разница, как они выглядели, какая разница, как они звучали. Самое главное, что они говорят. Пока, дорогие. Окей. Да. Странно. У меня брат и сестра, и они тоже были в этой школе. Армия спасения, благотворительная организация, она занималась нашим воспитанием, образованием. Ну и так я попала в школу Ареал. И феномен, который я видел, при котором я присутствовал, он, конечно, меня очень сильно поразил. В этот день, с моей точки зрения, конечно, где я была, что находилась, где я вам буду рассказывать, как это было с моей точки зрения. Это был светлый день. Они играли в чехарду. Прыгать друг через друга, прыгать. Это чехарда. Это непростая игра. И мы видели, вспышка была в небесах. И очень тяжело это описать, как это происходило, но они просто появились, как будто ниоткуда. Все, что я могу сказать, это два существа вышли из этих. И вокруг них была толпа маленьких существ. Они, в принципе, чуть ли не прыгали тоже через друг друга. Повторяли то, что мы делали. Мы перестали играть и стали смотреть на них. И как только я посмотрел на него, я сразу поняла, что идут, ну, сейчас она поняла, что это идут телепатические какие-то сообщения, которые мне говорят о том, чего я никогда раньше не слышала и слышать не могла. И, естественно, на меня это произвело огромное впечатление. И видно, что она до сих пор оттаять не может. Но дело в том, что они ее с тех пор посещали. Звук ужасный у этого видео. Я немножко разъясню вам, что к чему. Эти два существа, которые прибыли, это было все внутри ее головы. На самом деле мы не знаем, как это было, но вот тысячи мелькающих изображений, которые скапливались в какой-то информационный поток, и Мели начала вроде как понимать, что он ей показывает. Они ничего не сказали, ни одного звука. Они все через глазки передавали.
In September of 1994, more than 60 children at the Ariel Primary School in Zimbabwe witnessed a strange silver object land outside the playground and were approached by small black beings with large entrancing eyes. The children's stories alarmed their teachers and aroused the curiosity of the BBC and the esteemed Harvard psychiatrist John E. Mack. While the common elements in the children's stories suggest that the object and the beings were physically real, the many divergent details and the kids' highly personal reactions suggest that there are many subjective elements to UFO and entity encounters that we don't yet understand. The Ariel Primary School is a private institution in the agricultural community of Rua, 22 kilometers outside of Harare, the capital city of Zimbabwe. The school was founded by area farmers in 1991, and by 1994, it had more than 200 students from grades 1 to 7, or from 6 to 12 years old. The students were a racially diverse group, though most of them were from wealthier farming families. Friday, September 16th was a clear and warm sunny day. During the regular 10:30 a.m. recess, all of the teachers were attending a staff meeting inside the school, and only one adult was outdoors, operating a tuck shop or snack store on the playground. Shortly after recess began, the tuck shop attendant, Allison Kirkman, volunteer and mother to one of the Ariel students, said that a bunch of kids ran into the shop and told her about a little black man on the playground. Kirkman thought that the kids were trying to trick her and refused to leave the shop. Shortly after, dozens of children rushed into the school, screaming about a landed craft outside the schoolyard and little black men with big black eyes. The teachers could tell that the kids were deeply frightened, but they could not believe what they were saying. The school's headmaster, Colin Mackey, sat the students down and had them each produce a drawing of the things they saw, as well as a written account of their experiences. These efforts committed the children's earliest memories to record and created crucial documentation for later investigators. Shortly after classes ended and the kids were sent home for the weekend, teachers saw several parents searching the ground at the edge of the schoolyard with their children. The yard was virtually empty, with minimal grass, no trees or bushes, and only a few play structures near the classrooms. The children said that the beings appeared beyond the fence at the furthest point from the school, not a place where the children typically played. Beyond this fence was a field covered in brush and short trees. There was nothing there that could have been mistaken for a UFO or entity, and no indication that anything had been there at all. The following Monday, the school was inundated with letters from parents asking what had happened to their children on Friday that made them so frightened and upset. Several students were traumatized and did not return to school for several days after the event. That week, Tim Leach, senior correspondent with the BBC, visited the school, and other African news outlets picked up the story as well, including South African and Zimbabwean state television channels. Leach spoke with the children and had them tell their stories for the first time on video. He found that they were all genuinely shaken and was convinced that they believed what they were saying. Leach later claimed that despite all his experience as a war reporter, it was the aerial school incident that frightened him most. Cynthia Hind, a MUFON field investigator and editor of UFO Afra News, was the first ufologist on the case. Gunter Hofer, an electronics enthusiast and acquaintance of Hind's, accompanied her and swept the yard with a Geiger counter, a metal detector, and a magnetometer, with no unusual finds. The team also sent ground samples to the University of Zimbabwe, which returned with no significant anomalies. Whatever the children saw, if anything, were then only memories. After reviewing their drawings and first written accounts, Hind interviewed 62 of the witnesses grades 3 and up, and spoke with the school's teachers and administrators. Dr. John E. Mack, the noted Harvard Medical School psychiatrist and ufologist, was visiting Africa at the time to explore the abduction phenomenon there, and visited Ariel's school. He spent 2 days talking with the kids, accompanied by his assistant and a South African TV camera operator who filmed some of the interviews. Hind and Mack found that the witnesses' stories conflicted on many details, but converged on a few key claims. Most students had agreed that a round, elliptical-shaped silver-colored object appeared amongst some trees just beyond the boundary of the schoolyard. The object had a lustrous surface and a bright white or golden glow. Most of the students only saw the object on the ground, but some claimed to have seen it flying over top of the schoolyard before landing. The object glowed brightly from its landing place, attracting the kids' attention, so they ran towards the fence to investigate. At this point, 1 or 2 small black beings approximately 1 meter tall emerged from the object. Some kids said that one paced back and forth on the ground, and others said that they saw one on the object doing the same thing. The being on the ground then began to move towards the students. The beings were mostly black, with pale faces, and huge elongated black eyes that were angled inwards. Very few of the students reported any other details about the beings' faces, though at least one saw a nose and mouth. 12-year-old Liesel and 8-year-old Emily remember the being hovering over the ground rather than walking, though others described it taking steps. Emily said that the 2 beings hopped alongside her and Liesel, as if to imitate the girls skipping on the playground, though their feet never touched the ground. After covering a short distance, the figure or figures stopped and stared at the children, who all felt compelled to stare back in return. Emily said that the 2 beings she saw appeared in front of her instantaneously. At this point, some of the students began to feel that the beings were communicating with them telepathically, and a few students felt a rush of wind blow by. Several children saw visions of environmental catastrophe. Liesel said that she saw a vision of Earth after all trees had been cleared, and there was no air left to breathe, and received a nonverbal warning about humans destroying the planet. Another student saw visions of polluted oceans. Emily saw a quick succession of still images showing scenes of the environment in crisis, and was urged to use technology more responsibly. Another student, Emma, received a similar message about humanity's destructive use of technology, and given the imperative that we mustn't get too technologed. 11-year-old Salma was holding Emma's hand during the encounter, and yet she has no memory of any communication at all, though she felt that the being was gazing into her soul, as she put it. Both Salma and Emily have stated that they felt that time was distorted for the duration of the encounter. Salma said that although she tried to run to the protection of her younger siblings, she was unable to break eye contact with the being. After several minutes of staring at the children, perhaps as many as 15, the encounter abruptly ended, and the intruders disappeared. At least one student said that he saw the beings climb back inside the object and fly away again, but most said that the beings and the UFO simply vanished on the spot. Emily claimed that they disappeared the instant that the bell rang for the end of recess, and her sense of reality immediately returned to normal. Though many of the students agreed on these details, there was a considerable amount of variation in their stories, and some outright contradiction. Some students reported seeing the black entities, but not the silver object. Other students described the object in vivid detail, but had no recollection of the entities. Some students nearby to the action even said that they saw nothing at all. Multiple students attested to seeing a cluster of objects flying in the air, while others were adamant that they saw only one. As Hind noted, although most of the students identified the object as some sort of vessel or craft, they could not agree on its appearance. Students variously drew windows, doors, lights, cockpits, landing gear, and many combinations of the above. 2 boys said that it had stripes of black and green, others that there was a platform around the outside. One child drew it red. Most agreed, however, that it was generally elliptical in shape. There were also several different accounts of how the object arrived on the ground. Several noted that they saw flashes of bright, colorful lights above their heads before the sighting, and at least 2 students claimed to have heard loud noises in the sky. One student even described a flute-like sound. Another student claimed to have witnessed the object and several auxiliaries flying along some electricity wires beside the schoolyard before landing in the field. He said that they flew over him with flashing red lights, disappearing and reappearing elsewhere in the sky several times before landing. Other students drew the object flying overhead in their illustrations as well. There was generally more agreement on the appearance of the euphonauts, but accounts varied here as well. Some described the figures as having long black hair, while other students claimed to have seen no hair at all. One student described the beings as looking like little plump humans, with long straight hair, though Emily saw beings with long necks and spindly limbs. Some students claimed that the beings wore skin-tight garments or shiny suits, and others thought that they were naked, with black skin. One child claimed that the figures looked just like a shadow. Another young girl said that there were 3 beings, in black, red, and white. While most teachers admitted to being initially skeptical of the children's stories, they later came to realize how profound the experience had been for the witnesses. The Ariel School headmaster acknowledged that he believed that the children saw something, but suggested that some of their recollections were products of their imaginations. However, other teachers were more sympathetic to the children's claims. It was difficult for them to accept that the children's imaginations had caused them all to conjure up such a strange experience, and to react so dramatically. The teachers were generally convinced that the students could not have faked their hysteria when running into the school that morning, and that no one could have forced dozens of children to play along with the same hoax. Hind agreed. Mack was also convinced that the students had shared an authentic experience, and that it was unlikely, if not impossible, that they had all staged a hoax.
Here, these are people of sound mind, by and large, telling me something that's very... They know that I might think they're crazy, and so they're a little concerned about telling me, and they're very full of questioning themselves and doubt, and the whole quality of the way they talk about it is the way a person talks about experience that happened to them.
On the morning of the kids' encounter, a woman who owned a farm near the school saw a bright orange ball of light outside her chicken coop. The day before, a mother and her son reported seeing a craft ahead of their car, around the same time that 3 Ariel students saw an object shaped like a cigarette above the schoolyard. And the day before that, thousands of people across Eastern Africa saw massive lights in the sky. Many of these sightings were probably due to a meteor shower in the area, but Hind received calls and letters from numerous people asserting that they had seen a fireball with a tail of sparks and smaller lights. Like many UFO and entity encounters, the Ariel School incident appears to have been part of a broader wave of sightings. Hind and Mack's research on the Ariel incident was never published as a formal report. Hind shared some details on the case in UFO Afro News in 1995, and more in her 1996 book, UFOs Over Africa. Mack was killed by a drunk driver in 2004, before publishing any of his work on the incident. After his death, Mack's family created the John E. Mack Institute, which hired filmmaker Randall Nickerson to produce a film based on Mack's involvement with the case. Nickerson went on to find Tim Leach, as well as several of the Ariel School witnesses, then in their mid to late 20s, and arranged a reunion in Los Angeles in 2013. He has also organized a number of public appearances and media interviews to help the Ariel School witnesses share their stories. Nickerson's film, Ariel Phenomenon, is now complete and seeking distribution. There is no doubt that the Ariel School students saw something unusual that day, but what it was is still unclear. Nothing about the object or the entities suggested a particular origin, either on Earth or in outer space. The beings conformed in many ways to the image of the gray visitors popularized by Whitley Strieber's Communion in 1987, but differed greatly in other ways, including in the presence of hair, squat bodies, and black skin or bodysuits. Still, they were similar to other commonly encountered entities in the sense that they only stood about a meter tall. Nickerson has also claimed at a public talk that many of the children's stories were extremely bizarre and highly illogical. For example, he spoke of one student who said that he saw one of the black beings approach across the field, then vanish, and instantly reappear where it started, only to repeat the exact same approach. Perhaps the numerous discrepancies in the children's accounts were due to their failures to accurately recall what they'd seen. After all, it's well known that human memory is extremely faulty, especially when memories are formed under stressful and traumatic circumstances. Alternatively, the discrepancies in the children's accounts may reflect real differences in the things themselves, or in the children's perception of those things, rather than simply differences in their recollection of those things. Ufologist John Keel proposed that UFOs were vessels for ultra-terrestrials, or interdimensional beings, that could somehow manipulate how they appeared, or how we perceived them. Jacques Vallée made a similar argument in suggesting that UFOs are both physically real and culturally constructed, either by some mind-interfacing technological operation, or a collective act of psychic projection. These considerations have moved some ufologists to focus attention away from the strictly material aspects of the UFO phenomenon and towards their effects on witnesses. Nickerson, too, has focused on the effects that this event has had on witnesses, and his documentary offers a fuller view of the ways in which it changed them. It was a dark and frightening experience for the majority. One student said that the being looked evil, as if it wanted to come and take the kids. Many of the younger children said that they feared that the little men were coming to eat them. Liesl told Mack that when she got home that day, she felt horrible inside, describing an anxiety about humans not treating the environment with enough respect. Still, years later, many of the students contacted by Nickerson and other journalists claim that it was a powerful and transformative experience for them that initiated lifelong changes in their openness to new ideas and their general sense of purpose. For example, Salma pursued degrees in international relations and human rights law, and claims that the incident taught her to believe her own experiences, regardless of what other people thought of them. Liesl became a social support worker. She said that she has always felt a strong duty to give back and do her part since the incident. Emily began producing art, with pieces that frequently feature otherworldly beings. Mack made similar kinds of observations of abductees, or experiencers, in general. He claimed that many experiencers seek out more fulfilling, outreach-based jobs after their encounters, become better stewards of the environment, and develop a greater sense of spirituality. It's difficult to imagine that the students could have effected these changes on the basis of a mistaken sighting or an imagined incident. What is particularly striking about the Ariel School case is the sheer number of witnesses and the diversity of the student body. The fact that none of the witnesses have gone back on their claims or confessed to a hoax, even after more than 25 years, is a huge point in favor of their veracity. Witnesses such as Salma, Liesel, and Emily
Okay, my friends, this is a strange one for you, but who knows? Just who knows? Now, I have a friend, Russian guy, nice guy.
Приветствую вас, друзья мои, это может будет странным для вас, но кто знает, кто знает. У меня есть друг русский парень, хороший парень, и он утверждает, что живые души мертвых окаменевших живьем людей заперты в мраморных статуях эпохи Возрождения. И я знаю, я уверен, я имею в виду, что сам я уже давно обнаружил, что есть сущности внутри каменных или мраморных статуй, находящиеся внутри все это время. Когда они были живы точно так же, как горгоны рассказывали о Персии, они сказали, что сделали это. И если вы посмотрите на это, и у вас есть способность вообще понимать, что вы видите, что это в чистом виде биологии, и я иду показать вам биологические, анатомические доказательства этого — кровавая ткань. А вот этот белый материал, вы видите, что это одна большая полоса сухожилия, и это идентично тому, что в вашем теле. Посмотрите на вот эту плечевую мышцу. Это мышцы и кости внутри, и так же точно это находится и в моем, и в твоем плече. Разве не ужасно выглядит этот парень? Он разваливался, и они кладут штукатурку. Вот здесь и несколько кусков металла в его лбу и тому подобное, Что я думаю, я утверждаю, что деконструировано. Никогда не строил то, что на 100%. Биологически сейчас, если ты не можешь понять, что вы только что видели и что вы это видите. Здесь как анатомический эквивалент. Вы видите вот грудь существа, а вот это грудные кости, и некоторые из них упали. Вы знаете, это же ребра в изломе, и это все внутри органы целы. А вот там органы, легкие, печень, и я совершенно уверен, что это все биология. Ты знаешь, мой русский друг, кажется, думает, что он хотел бы видеть, как люди делают такие же тесты с ДНК, как и он сам. Но да у тех, у кого есть время и деньги на это. Я лично больше не буду делать тесты, я делал это. Вы знаете, что у меня есть испытания ДНК великанов с моего огорода. Я думаю, это то, чего он хочет, что у меня есть. Немного, 100 тысяч подписчиков, аудитории сейчас, когда, если кто-то заинтересован в этом, и может быть кто-нибудь будет делать тесты, напишите мне, он оплачивает все расходы плюс бонус за найденное на карте. Покажи фото, и если кто хочет сказать, вот я нашел что-то, и я думаю, это что-то стоящее, сразу же пишите нам. Я уверен, внутри этих статуй есть существа или живая душа. Я видел, что многие из них, это не просто, а нет, это совсем не просто. Мой друг русский парень, у него полная история об истории. Я бы сказал, еще пару шагов вперед и направо. Да вот там его история, его рассказы о тяжелых временах в России. Сейчас он в Канаде живет с конца 90-х. В любом случае у него есть помощник в Петербурге вот прямо сейчас, и он говорит мне, что у них есть летний сад, и там были самые сказочные и уникальные статуи существ, и они все разваливаются сейчас. Поэтому, говорит он мне, они меняют их на пластиковые копии, но они просто могут развалиться, и поэтому нам нужно сохранить их. Сохранить их так, чтобы вы могли ходить вокруг 24 часов 7 дней в неделю. В середине зима, середина лета, ты просто пришел, и всегда сад летний открыт, и пеленать не надо на зиму статуи. И тогда вы знаете, не только пластик, так, это не пойдет плохо, и они, вероятно, просто выбросят остальные. Я не знаю, что они с ними делают, но Он очень обеспокоен тем, что там заключены живые души людей, и они умирают ежедневно, и я не могу не согласиться с этим. Странно также, что Геодон Рихтер, евросоюзный фармагигант, спонсирует на 100% все подобные замены в России. Странно, правда? Сейчас я не знаю, у них есть душа, я не знаю, если она выходит оттуда позже. Они слышат, видят, могут спать и думать, даже представить невозможно, но вам над самим разгадывать хоть что-нибудь из этого. Да-да, тебе придется решить это самому, нужны тебе тесты ДНК, и кто стоит в музеях твоего города. У него есть очень глубокие чувства по поводу этих заключенных живых душ, и он утверждает, что у него более 40 тестов ДНК, взятых от разных статуй на разных континентах, и результаты, которые вернулись, как вы знаете, все как один человек.